I want to go back to then the trigger interviews. Start small, one conversation at a time. Not try to convince, but try to understand what matters for each person, and use these to connect to their motivation and sort of the broader company ambition. And then sort of, if you stop fighting resistance and start mobilizing energy, you will guess that is my experience. So it's in the small conversations that actually the real transformation begins, not in the bigger frameworks, but in the human alignment.
Welcome to Table Stakes, where we dive deep into the conversations that matter most in customer experience. I'm Michelle Stevens, course director at CXM Academy, and today I'm sitting with Jannecke Drangert-Hveding to talk about the reality that many CX transformation failures are stakeholder failures. They happen because someone didn't understand that the CFO cares about different things than the head of sales. Yaneka is a strategist who spent years understanding what separates CX initiatives that thrive from those that barely survive. This conversation is for anyone who's ever felt like they're speaking a different language than their stakeholders, who's watched a great CX project get derailed by politics, and anyone who wants to learn how to build the coalition of support that makes CX programs unstoppable. Jannecke, welcome to Table Stakes.
Hi, Michelle. It's great being here. Thank you for having me.
Well, you were very welcome. You were very high on the list when it comes to stakeholder management. So, yeah, I was like, I have so many questions for you to ask. Before we dive in, tell us a little bit about your own journey. What experiences shaped your approach to leading transformation and customer-centric change?
Yeah. Well, I've worked both on the client side and as a consultant, running projects and programs and transformations within customer centricity, so to speak. And I think I must admit that maybe what really made me, start now my own company, Customer C, some years ago, was after being responsible for transformation in quite a complex organizations, and also having, consultants supporting me. And I was really, I learned a lot about really what makes the organization engage and move. And also I have this idea that, you need to have advisors and support and people that cheer on you from the outside, that really have the respect for what change is really about. So that really is something that engages me a lot, and I think about a lot. And I'm still learning, but I really, really enjoy this topic.
Yeah, well, that's perfect. But let's start with the foundation. Now, most CX professionals know stakeholder management is important, but they often treat it like a checklist. Now, how do you help them to move from simply mapping stakeholders to really understanding them? And what does that look like in practice?
Mm. Well, if I'm allowed, Michelle, can I start by talking about the sort of 5 success factors for this sort of transformational change from my point of view? Because I did some research on this in the Nordic markets, and I think it's important to understand what it takes to really succeed. So I've talked to so many. Transformational leaders and executives about this topic, and I found it's 5 factors that really make a difference. It's shared mental models, it's strategic ownership, it's the proximity to the value creation of the organization, it's CX and EX integration, and then last but not least, the genuine mobilization. So I'm always trying to look at that and trying to understand sort of where are we at as a starting point when looking into the influence side of things and the stakeholder management. Because I think one of the things that we've experienced is that, you have the checklist and you want to find who are the stakeholders and where are they at. But I think you really need to see this in a context of what are you trying to accomplish, and how is the setup overall to actually succeed. So it shouldn't be kind of a checklist. It should be an integrated part of how you adopt and approach the whole topic. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, that makes absolute sense. But I also think that we often miss some of the stakeholders. Now, what are the stakeholder types according to you that CX professionals commonly overlook?
I would say, and I've learned that as something I was struggling with to understand the importance of myself. It's the middle layer. As a strategic consultant and as an executive myself, getting top management attention, of course, is crucial. But when we're talking about actually getting change through the organization, it's typically the middle layer that's overlooked. Those are the ones to help, translate the strategy into behavior. And they actually all missed out on the stakeholder map. But they are also super important to actually, decide whether the culture and the behavior actually changes.
Yeah, is that do we overlook them or by design, or is it because we assume that they are smart enough to move that transformation forward? How does that work? Why are they so often overlooked? Actually,
That's a very good question. I don't know. From my experience, I underestimated the importance, to be honest, and I think that's often the case. To understand that it's quite also. I mean, it's not one group, right? There's a different stakeholders in the middle layer, so you need to invest enough energy and time to actually to talk to the people and to really understand. I think one of my reflections, and it's also, what we're talking about, the key capabilities when we talk about influence, and active listening is actually one of them. And I think that's often underestimated. Really trying to understand the context they work in, and really trying to understand their attitude and approach to the change coming. Where are they prepared for it? Is this kind of this here they come again, right? So now let's just wait and see if they can if it passes, or we actually have to take this seriously, right? I mean, a lot of organizations have so many different types of change programs, so you're just trying to survive, right? So I think, really digging into understanding the stakeholders, but also the sort of nuances that are there is super important.
yeah. Now, I always think that people often simplify stakeholders. It's like the CFO only cares about money, the CMO is always talking a lot and cares about the brand. But in your experience, what are the deeper motivations that drive people's reaction to change?
Mm. I think one of my key learnings was also when we did strategic work, like with must-win battles, etc., was to really understand both the intellectual journey and the emotional journey for all teams and individuals, and I think that's always uh, underestimated. I think there are now, tools that and frameworks you can use in leadership and influence capabilities, seeing both on the values, on the thinking and the practice. So you're really considering. I think all of us as individuals have a combination, a preference with which is a combination of the three. Values is really, the heart, what really drives people. Thinking, the more analytical, intellectual approach, and then practice. Some people are really quite, they want to understand what it looks like, hands-on sort of experience. So you need to find the sort of right balance for the different groups or the different individuals to adapt to that. So I think you're right. It's very easy to think that the CFO is all about numbers, and if you just can do the napkin version of the numbers and really demonstrate that, it's all sold. But I think that's a bit too easy approach.
But the problem is that when you talk about stakeholder management, then I think, okay, so you need to translate everything into a story that is made for them. But what I often struggle with, and I don't know about you, but how do you balance that understanding? How do you balance understanding professional objectives with the personal dynamics that actually can shape a stakeholder's behavior during the change as well? How
Yeah.
does that work for you?
So I've throughout the years I've used one technique quite a lot, and that's what I call a trigger interview. And so what I do is one-to-one interviews, and then you try to understand really, what's their perspectives on the change that you're planning, and what's their fears and hopes. And then you get a balance of both the sort of the very practical side of things, but also the ambitions and the sort of personal agenda. And getting that overview through those trigger interviews really helps you understand where you're at and what needs to be discussed and approached in order to succeed. And also, that's one of the areas where I think you can use externals is when you then afterwards facilitates this discussion, and you have someone in the room who's facilitating that don't have their personal agenda, but really just wants to help you as a group, find the best solutions and get things up on the table also to really address what does it take to get where we want to go.
Yeah. How does a trigger interview actually work? Because, and I'm asking because I got that question like 100 times in the last 3 weeks now. Well, not 100, but very often, because people are, so we talk about trigger interviews or we talk about stakeholder interviews. For, for people who practice it every day, it is something that comes very naturally. But
Mm.
how does that work? How many do you need? What kind of questions do you ask? Can you walk us through an example of something like that?
Yeah, my for sure. So my experience is, and it's a good question because this is something I've done so long, so I need to think about now how I actually approach it. But usually, you can ask for, and some of these stakeholders might be super busy, so you're trying to say, oh, can I get like 40, 45 minutes to sit down and go through these topics around the project, and that should be more than sufficient to get an overview. And then you try to you usually have some 5 to 8 questions that you want to go through, but you're keeping it quite open, and you're really trying to understand that individual's position in it, and really what's in it for them, and what are their concerns, and what's their agenda. And being open minded and curious and really trying to understand that really helps. So I don't think it's it's you should try to follow the natural flow. I don't think there's a super recipe on how you do it, except go in the ask open questions, be really curious, and engage, and try to understand. Use your curiosity in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many of these stakeholder interviews do you do actually to have a very good idea of, yeah, this is the direction that we're going in? Is it a random number, or is it a fixed amount of interviews?
It's never a fixed amount, Michelle. You always adapt to this context, but and you can also face it. So you can do some in the beginning. You do maybe just 1 or 2 interviews of different stakeholder groups, and that should be give you a starting point, because then you're trying to get the overview, but you really try to understand. When you're working with stakeholder management, you're trying to understand who actually needs to change, and how big is the change, and then also who influences the individuals that actually are to do this change to get the success that you want. And when you have this analysis up, and you try to have an idea at least of how it looks, then you can decide who you should actually speak to understand where they're actually at currently, and how you can engage them in wanting them to be part and enable them to be part of the change desired. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Um, One of the things I'm also thinking about is that once you understand your stakeholders, how much does that influence your approach? When do you lean on data? When do you tell stories? And when do you engage them directly in shaping the change?
Well, let's then step back and actually define what influencing stakeholder is, because that's really important to me. That it's not manipulation, it's not persuasion, it's actually the ethical exercise of leadership communication. And you want to align purpose, you want to be empathetic, and you want to use the strategic awareness to enable them to act. Right? That's really what influence is about. So, and of course, you want then to involve them, because the best way to get people to want and enable people to act is really understand them, and really be empathetic about where they're at, and actually involve them to help you describe what it takes to get the action going, because that's in
Yeah.
the end that's all we're looking for, right? So I definitely see this as a way of finding smart ways of involving, because these are often very busy people. So finding the right setup is crucial to do in the specific context, but definitely involving and also finding ambassadors, finding the core people that really sort of influence the sentiment in stakeholder group is also important.
Yeah. And what is the role then of these ambassadors? I mean, I get it from a principal point of view, but how do you make their contributions meaningful? And then, yeah, how do you get them on board with your ideas? Yeah, how does that work?
I think it's all about authenticity and integrity in the end. Really need to understand and be open about what you're trying to accomplish, and you try to get the people that want to be part of that change, but also be honest about what it takes, because sometimes some of these ambassador roles, is something they do on the side as a part of a matrix kind of organization. But yeah, actually identifying the right people and getting them involved is a crucial part of success, I would say. So that's when you get the sort of genuine mobilization, is when you get people on board, and the right people on board, and the people that others trust and listen to, so that they are comfortable with those representing and giving the input on a part of their unit or their entity. Mm.
Yeah. Is there any methodology that you like to use, like ADKAR or any other change management methodology, or do you simply adapt on the spot, or how does it work for
Mm.
you?
I do. I mean, I've used ADKAR a lot, and I still do. But I think now I'm always trying to see how things are evolving. There's a lot now new literature in leadership in general, and especially when it comes to influence. So I think I'm just trying to test out new ideas that I get and see what works. And then, of course, I have some principles and some models within ARCA that you always use, that when you're analyzing is sort of the influence and interest, etc. So yes, no, I think you always need to adapt, and sometimes because I really believe that going back to the 5 success factors of getting this as integrated in the strategy and in the sort of overall governance of the organization as possible. I try to use all that sort of mainstream thinking as well, because you need to simplify and make it as easily available as possible. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree that you need to be aware of that. That not everybody is on the same level of understanding of that you have, and that you need to make it easy for them to contribute, or yeah, maximize the value they get out of it. Um, you've facilitated change across complex organizations. What have you learned about using influence across networks, not just up and down, but across functions?
Oh, I have such a clear preference on working to, cross functional. I mean, if you're in the space of CX and customer centricity, and the customer journey usually goes across the organization, so you need to engage in ways that makes the sort of teams tick, and support also the organizational development in going toward more cross-functional work. So yes, I think there are cultural differences, but I work mostly in the Nordics, and it's the the organizations are quite flat when it comes to who can actually influence. You can have quite junior people with a lot of integrity and motivation that actually can take a key role. So it doesn't really need to sort of go through all the layers to get there. And I think getting people involved and wanting to be part of changes is super super energy booster for the team also. But yes, I think, the more horizontal involvement and across organizational involvement, the better. That's but finding smart ways of doing it. Because it's otherwise you can. I mean, if you're setting up a program and you're telling you want to involve everyone, I would myself as the CEO would stop that project immediately. So it's all about being smart about how you involve and how you get people on board, and how you sort of um, tackle the different challenges also going forward.
I'm quite jealous of you working in a context where you have flat organizations. That is something I can only dream about here in Central Europe. The more complexity, the better. They seem to think. No, but I'm joking. But we're coming to the end of our time together, and I want to ask you one last question. Many listeners are in that situation where they have very good ideas on customer experience, but they can't get the buy-in. What's the one thing they could start doing tomorrow to build momentum and get people genuinely on board with change?
Well, I think I want to go back to then the trigger interviews. Start small, one conversation at a time. Not try to convince, but try to understand what matters for each person, and use these to connect to their motivation and sort of the broader company ambition. And then sort of, if you stop fighting resistance and start mobilizing energy, you will get far. That is my experience. So it's in the small conversations that actually the real transformation begins, not in the bigger frameworks, but in the human alignment.
Sometimes when you're driving a program, you can also see it slow down, right? So you're losing momentum. Are there things that people can do to intervene there and to kick it up a notch again, or what is your experience on that?
Well, I mean, you always talk a lot about getting the quick wins up and doing the storytelling around these. And I guess it does work, actually, to remind people what you've accomplished and what you're trying to accomplish going forward. And then, try to boost energy going in that direction based on that. So then, of course, it's, telling the story about what you've already accomplished, and of course, celebrate what you've accomplished, but do that in a context of what you're really trying to do for your business, and tell the story there.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. To everybody listening, the message from Jannecke today is sobering and empowering. Sobering because it reminds us that technical excellence and strategic brilliance aren't enough. We need to be equally skilled at the human side of change. And I also find it empowering because it shows us that stakeholder management is a learnable skill with frameworks, strategies, and tactics we can all master. Thank you so much, Jannecke, for sharing your insights on this.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward.
You're very welcome. And I hope to run into you in Norway in the very near future again, or running into you here in Belgium. And I also want to thank. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, me too. You're more of a globetrotter than I am currently, Michelle. But who knows where we'll meet up next time.
All right, I get the message. We'll pick up coffee here in Antwerp soon. I will invite you. Don't. Well, okay, and thank you for listening to Table Stakes. If this conversation has sparked something in you, we'd love to hear about it. Until next time, have a great transformation.